So I want to build my daughter a step stool. And I know you're thinking that I just built the kitchen helper not long ago, but it's a little bit too heavy and cumbersome for her to move around on her own. So I want to build something small enough that she can easily pick up and move to wherever she needs it to be to use it whenever she needs it. I'll start by cutting out the parts for the top itself out of this pine that I have leaning up against the wall, and I'm just going to mark out the rough measurements. I'm trying to get as much of the straight grain material as I can out of this wood. I'm using a combination of my crosscut sled along with the bandsaw to cut each of the parts down before I can then take them over to the jointer. At this point, all I want to do is flatten one face and one edge of each one of the boards, and for the center board I'm going to take it back over to the table saw and thin it down just a little bit because it's a little wider than I need, and I'm trying to get rid of that knot if I can. And here I'm just gluing it up. Now I've got this little triangle drawn on the top here to sort of help me align the pieces so that I know to make sure that I get everything back at least close to where I want it to be while I'm gluing it up, and I want to try to keep the boards as flat as I can to the bottom of these clamps. For the leg material, I'm just going to use this oak that I have, and it's fairly straight grained, and I'll start by cutting it down with my handsaw, which is something I definitely need some more practice at. Now this board is narrow enough that I can easily fit it on the jointer, but it's wide enough so that once I cross cut these parts and then joint the one face and one edge, I can then glue them up on edge and will give me enough width I'll need for both legs. I'm using an old chisel here to clean up the glue squeeze out from the panel glue up that I did earlier before passing not only the top through the planer but also the four pieces for the legs. The parts for the legs are just getting a quick cleanup pass so that I can then go back and laminate them together to get the proper thickness I need. And for the top, I'm actually going to go ahead and finish milling it completely down to the final thickness I need it to be. And now I just have to glue laminate these blanks together to get the proper amount of thickness that I'm going to need for my legs. I always have a hard time getting just the right amount of glue spread on these whenever I'm trying to laminate something. I always seem to either put too little at first or too much and have a huge mess. While the glue up for those pieces are drying, I can finish cutting the top to its final length and width. I wasn't too overly concerned when gluing the leg blanks together as far as getting them perfectly aligned, because I knew once I had it all glued up, I can then go back and square everything up with the track saw. Now I'll send these blanks back to the planer to get the legs to the final thickness that I need them to be. To make the dados in the top that the two legs will fit into, I've obviously got to change out my regular table saw blade for my dado stack. Having all the blades stored in the two racks up on the French cleat wall really make it handy when it comes time to actually change these things out, because I know exactly where they are and they're pretty much within arm's reach. To cut the dados, I'm actually going to be using my crosscut sled. I started by sort of giving myself a rough mark as far as where I wanted to start at, and I'm going to just slowly sneak up on the cut. You will probably also notice in the video that I have a sacrificial backer board to try to prevent blowout on the opposite end of the top itself, and I'm just using MDF for that. It took quite a few passes and the help of my micro adjust feature on my miter gauge to get these things fitting exactly the way I wanted them to. I needed to lighten the look of the piece because overall it was just a little bit too blocky looking for my taste. So I came up with this idea to actually use a thin strip in my squeeze clamp here to sort of draw some really subtle curves on the top and on the legs. I'll use my bandsaw to cut out all the curves. I'm trying to stay as close to the line as I possibly can without going all the way to it, and then that way later, once I sand it, I can get all the way up to the line and have everything as even as possible. Some of the curves were subtle enough that I could have actually just sanded all the way to the line, but I figured it would make it much easier if I just went ahead and cut this stuff away at the bandsaw. That way I wouldn't have nearly as much to sand. The oscillating spindle sander really helps here as far as sanding this stuff down, especially on the oak end grain. Like, that stuff was crazy tough. It took quite a while to get it all not only to the line like it was supposed to be, but just smooth in general. To also assist in lightening the look of the rest of it, I'm going to round over the bottom side of the top and put a slight chamfer on the top side. Now it's finally time to glue the legs into the top. And anytime I'm gluing up a joint that involves end grain, I try to spread a little bit of glue onto the end grain and sort of let it soak up what it's going to, and then spread a little bit more glue on top of that. The hope is that by doing this, it will create a little bit better bond and a little bit better glue surface, so that once I clamp this thing up, it will maybe, hopefully, give me a good joint. The good thing is that there's a little bit of side grain glue action going on too because of the dado itself, and I don't have to rely solely on an end grain to face grain joint. I had to finish sanding the top flush with the legs because they were just a little bit proud, and I was able to kind of shape the sides to the legs, and I rounded over the legs themselves just by hand. For the finish here, I'm using just some spray-on oil-based polyurethane. I've used this before a long time ago on a project and it worked pretty well, and I figured, being that it was such a small project and I needed something that would sort of be kind of a durable finish, because for one thing, my kid's pretty rough on stuff. Another thing, if you're going to be stepping on this thing constantly, it needs something that will be sort of a durable finish. Although this wasn't the most exciting or biggest project I've ever built, I actually still learned quite a bit from it. One of those things being a possible design inspiration for maybe a larger scale project in the future. It's also cool making something that my daughter is not only going to be able to use but enjoy into the future, even if it's not completely what I had originally intended it for. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I really appreciate all the positive comments that I get every week, and all the thumbs up and the shares. It really helps my channel out a lot. And until next time, happy trails. Thanks for watching.